Hello, good morning, Aaron. How's it going?
Pretty good, Mr. Soup. How you doing?
I'm okay, thank you. Now, this morning, there's an ulterior motive to talking to you, and it's unusual that I Skype you and record you. But essentially, I wanted to address this question of whether or not Tutankhamun was murdered. You brought up the fact that very soon after he was discovered in 1922, people were suspecting, were asking the question, was this boy king killed, possibly in his sleep? So ultimately I've got out my magnifying glass and I'm ready to ask the question, was he murdered? Now, dum 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 murder. Now, if he was murdered, there would be certain things that you'd look for. So was it means, motive, and opportunity. And I suppose, first of all, would you just like to give us some background on the scenario? Why do people think he was murdered in the first place?
It had a lot to do with the body itself. When Howard Carter and them removed the coffin, got the body out, and started looking at it, they started seeing some abnormalities on the body itself that you just don't see during mummification. You had I think they saw some bone fragments on the back of the head, like an injury on the back of the cranium. Mm-hmm. You also had damaged ribs, damaged hip, and I believe I even heard broken leg bone. And
right.
That's just something you don't usually see in a mummified body unless it's been disturbed, which we know from them looking at it, it was not. So now the question comes, what are these injuries? What caused this? And then people, of course, the gears start turning in the head and they start thinking more, and all, people love a good mystery. And so they start coming up with theories, and that was one of them, and it caused quite a media frenzy. So. Okay,
and again, a media frenzy surrounding Tutankhamun. I can't imagine that happening. But and I do happen to know that one thing that sort of added to this was in 1968 there was an X-ray on his mummy, on his remains, I should say, sorry, and they found what they described as being a sort of like a dark mass at the back of the skull, which they thought could be evidence of blunt force. But subsequent analysis hasn't really shown so they couldn't actually identify it. They actually thought the damage to the skull could have been caused by Howard Carter and his team as they removed the mask from the boy king's head. I suppose the question is, okay, if that's potentially the means, maybe he was bashed in the back of the head. What's the motive and what's the opportunity? I mean, who would want to kill Tutankhamun, the pharaoh, a living god?
The main theory would have been his advisor, he was the one who became pharaoh afterwards. There have been a historical document actually of King Tutankhamun's wife, and forgive me, I can't pronounce her name, sending a message to the Hittites looking for a king because she wasn't going to be the wife of a servant. And now, of course, that's one of the theories, and that's one of the things you hear. But again, it's all conjecture. But that would have been the person with the most to gain, obviously. I mean, here you got this servant who's the advisor, and then suddenly the boy king at a very young age dies, and all of a sudden he's pharaoh.
I see. I believe her name was Ankhesenamun. Ankhesenamun. Yeah. Which actually, I suppose, in terms of linguistics, is not dissimilar to the meaning behind Tutankhamun. I think it's something about getting life from Amun, or initially the sun, the Aten. But anyway, so yes, she was desperate to marry into royalty, not to marry this advisor. So she wasn't necessarily too happy about it. Maybe she thought he was a bit shifty, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Is there anything, I mean, if this guy is the bad guy, I'm kind of imagining now like Jafar, in Aladdin, the vizier who wants to marry the princess. Right. Is there anything that actually that helps us maybe dismiss this theory, though, the idea of him actually being murdered? I mean, the CT scan in 2005 and other analyses seem to show that actually there's any number of injuries right the way down one side of his body. I mean, what else could have happened?
I've heard tons of different theories. I've heard that, of course, a lot of people most recently was the chariot. Of course, they found all those chariots in his tomb. Mm-hmm. He loved chariot racing. That there was an accident and the chariot threw him, and those were where those injuries came from, was being thrown from his chariot. Mm. including the back of the head, could be from a concussion, if that was the case. We've heard of hunting accident. He loved to hunt, and at the time when he was around, there were hippos in Egypt, and he loved to hunt the hippos, and one might have charged him. There could have been a hunting accident. And we've even heard lately a doctor talk about epilepsy, having a rare form of epileptic seizures that caused him to have a seizure, and maybe he fell and banged his head, and that was the end of that. I mean, there's a lot of different theories. The broken leg that they said they found, thought maybe it wasn't set right, and it could have gotten gangrene, kind of gotten real infectious, and that could have killed him. So there's quite a few different theories out there, but the problem is there's just not enough evidence to back those theories up. That's exactly what they are, just theories.
Right, okay. And I suppose this is where we start to get into that uncomfortable realm where actually there's lots of evidence, there's lots of theories, but because it happened so long ago, and because the evidence is so open to interpretation, we may never have the answer. And lots of people get very uncomfortable with that, especially with archaeology. They go, why don't you have the answer? You're a scientist. But okay, so well, I mean, is it possible that going down this epilepsy route? I mean, I know that his father Akhenaten was thought to maybe have some sort of genetic abnormality, maybe Marfan syndrome, maybe something else which affected his eyesight, and various things about, say, the way he looks in his sculptures. It's been suggested might be more than just an artistic style. And could it be? Do we know if there's any evidence that Tutankhamun could have just died from an innate something chronic that he perhaps inherited?
I mean, and again, that's another theory. I mean, it possibly very well could be, but the fact that the material that he was covered in, that black material, pretty much caused him to combust, to catch on fire, doesn't really help with trying to find any kind of forensic evidence that might show genetic defects.
Yeah. I think the word that some of the researchers used was cooked.
Cooked.
200 degrees C, cooked in his own
nice
coffin.
And crispy. Nice and crispy.
Oh dear. So what we've got lots of different speculation on how he died. So the idea of means, that's kind of gone out of the window. Motive, there's definitely a motive there. The sort of Jafar-like vizier, might have wanted some power, especially in a time of political turmoil following the dissolution of Akhenaten's heresy, as many people would have seen it. So there's definitely motive. And then opportunity, I suppose. If there is someone like a vizier, you're going to be able to sneak into his room, but we're just not going to be able to prove it because fundamentally something went wrong with the mummification process.
Right, exactly. And I mean, it comes down to, unless we find some sort of written documentation that can back up any of those things, you know, if you find a historical document saying he got thrown from a horse or anything else, or, you know, you find I's private diary was like, you're not going to be able to really prove it. And even then, if they did find writing, the way we are as humans, okay, he got thrown from a horse, but I could have somehow sabotaged the chariot that caused him to get... I mean, it could just keep going. I don't think we're ever going to find out what truly happened to him.
Yeah, okay. I'd be intrigued to know what looks like in hieroglyphics.
Yes.
It's just like a man like, some evil. Brilliant. Maybe on like a Doom Mountain or something.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. That's the Doom Mountain hieroglyph. That means, if we find that he's a megalomaniac.
There you go.
Yeah. Case solved.
Done. Put a stamp on it. We're done.
Okay, so essentially, just to summarise, we've got a mummy who has lots of different injuries, some of which might have been caused by the archaeologists themselves, but many of which he seems to have had when he went into the coffin. Then something went wrong. He was burned and crisped up in the coffin, and this story is very compelling. But ultimately, that question of murder is one that has a giant question mark on it, and it's just never really going to go away.
It's never going to go away. I agree. It's never going to go away. But that's sometimes the fun of it. I mean, that's one of the things that got me interested in archaeology. Just reading these stories and like, wow, that could be a possibility, and it just makes it more entertaining. It's really fun to read and to study that stuff. Will we ever find the answer? I doubt it. But that doesn't mean you can't have a good time learning all the wonderful things about it and having good discussions with people like yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you. But exactly, and also examining his sandals.
Yes.
If you haven't watched the top 10 yet, discoveries, look at the top 10 discoveries. Grand. Well, thank you so much, Aaron, for getting up so early and talking to me this morning. It's been a pleasure just going over these ideas, and I just say, maybe just it's one of those things that we just have to enjoy the fact that we don't know and just get on with it.
That's right.
Yeah, great.
Yep, exactly. I appreciate being here. Thank you, Mr. Soup.
You're very welcome. Bye bye.
Take care.